They say that wealth can buy comfort, security, and even admiration, but it cannot buy loyalty, nor can it purchase the kind of love that remains unshaken when all else is stripped away. Oliver Montgomery, a man whose name was whispered in boardrooms and praised in newspapers, knew this truth more painfully than anyone. On paper, his life was perfection, owner of one of the largest real estate empires in Texas, a mansion with marble halls and crystal chandeliers, fleets of luxury cars, and invitations to the most exclusive galas. But behind the immaculate image of success was a man consumed by loneliness. Oliver was only 34, yet his eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had seen the true face of greed too many times. Women were never absent in his world. He was handsome, tall, with strong features and the quiet authority of a man who always knew what he wanted. But every time he thought he had found love, it slipped away, revealed to be nothing more than lust for his wealth. He had caught whispered conversations, women speaking to friends about his fortune, had seen their smiles fade the moment he hinted at simplicity. None of them looked at Oliver, the man. They only saw Oliver, the billionaire. One evening, after another dinner where his date dropped hints about yachts and jewelry rather than dreams or values, Oliver returned to his mansion and stood before the vast windows that overlooked the city skyline. He had never felt smaller. He thought of his late mother, a kind woman who used to tell him, "The one who truly loves you, Oliver, won't care what you can give her. She will care only for who you are." But how could he find such a person in a world blinded by wealth? That night, a daring idea was born inside him. If women could not see past his riches, perhaps he had to take the riches away. He would shed the skin of the billionaire, strip himself of the cars, the suits, and the reputation. He would step into the world as someone else, someone with nothing to offer but himself. Yet just being poor would not be enough, he thought. The world is full of actors pretending to be less than they are, only to reveal their treasures later. If he wanted to uncover truth, he would need to test loyalty at its deepest level. And so Oliver decided to pretend he was blind. It was the perfect disguise. A man who cannot see, who has nothing, who struggles through the world in silence. What woman would choose to stay with him unless she truly loved his heart? It was bold. It was reckless. But it was the only way he could think of to break the curse of suspicion that money had placed on his life. The next weeks became a secret mission. He went to a small town far from the city where no one knew his name. He rented a modest room in an old boarding house and dressed himself in second-hand clothes, scuffed shoes, and an old cane. He learned the movements of someone who had lost his sight. How to tilt his head slightly as if listening carefully, how to move the cane step by step, how to smile faintly when others spoke, as though painting their presence in his mind. It was difficult at first. He stumbled, knocked into furniture, and once nearly gave himself away when he instinctively caught a glass that someone dropped near him. But he practiced relentlessly, not because he wanted to deceive, but because he wanted authenticity in the test he had created. He would not allow a single crack in the disguise that could betray the truth. And then, one morning, he walked into the small-town bakery. The smell of fresh bread, warm sugar, and cinnamon filled the air, and the sound of laughter floated behind the counter. That was the day he first heard her voice. Her name was Clara. She was 28, with auburn hair tied back in a messy bun and eyes that held the softness of someone who had known struggle but never let it harden her spirit. She worked in the bakery to support her younger sister, often staying late after shifts to clean up when everyone else had gone home. Clara was not rich, nor was she adorned in luxury. Her dress was simple, her hands sometimes dusted with flour, yet she carried herself with a grace that seemed to shine brighter than jewels. When Oliver entered, she greeted him kindly, noticing the cane in his hand and the careful way he stepped. "Would you like some help finding a seat?" she asked warmly. For the first time in years, Oliver felt something stir inside him that had nothing to do with money or appearances. Her tone was genuine. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, just simple kindness. He nodded, playing his part, and allowed her to guide him to a table. The warmth of her touch on his arm lingered long after she stepped away. Day after day, he returned to the bakery. He bought only the cheapest items, claiming he had little money, and always sat quietly at the corner table. Yet Clara spoke to him every time, asking about his day, sharing small stories, and laughing in a way that made even the dullest hours brighter. Oliver found himself smiling more than he had in years, not because of wealth or status, but because of her presence. He learned of her sacrifices, how she had given up her own dream of becoming a teacher to care for her sister after their parents passed, how she worked double shifts to pay rent, and how she never complained despite the heavy burden. And Clara, in turn, learned of him, or rather, the version of him he presented. He told her he had lost his sight in an accident years ago, that he lived simply, and that life had not been kind. Yet she never once treated him with pity. She treated him with dignity. The more time he spent with her, the heavier the secret in his heart became. He had started this as a test, but now it felt like something more. Every laugh, every gentle word, every time she guided his hand so he wouldn't spill his coffee, all of it carved deeper into his soul. Clara wasn't just passing the test. She was rewriting what Oliver thought was possible. But shadows of doubt lingered. What if, when the truth came out, she felt betrayed? What if she thought he had mocked her kindness with lies? The thought kept him awake at night in the small boarding house, staring at the ceiling in darkness he pretended to know. Yet for now, he continued the act, driven by the hope that this time, perhaps, fate had brought him someone who could love Oliver the man, and not Oliver the millionaire. And so the story began. The story of a man who had everything but chose to live as if he had nothing, in search of a love that could not be bought, a love that would see beyond sight, beyond wealth, beyond all disguise. Oliver never thought that the sound of a woman's laughter could become the highlight of his day, yet now he found himself living for it. Every morning he woke in the creaky boarding house bed, the air filled with the scent of dust and old wood, and he longed for the moment when Clara's cheerful voice would greet him at the bakery. Her laughter was different from the polished, rehearsed chuckles of the women at high society dinners. It was real, full of warmth and life, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. Clara had a gift. She could make people feel seen, even when Oliver claimed he could not see at all. She never hesitated when speaking with him. She never rushed to help him in a way that made him feel weak. Instead, she walked beside him, guiding him when necessary, but letting him retain his dignity. And in that quiet, steady kindness, Oliver felt something he hadn't felt in years: respect. Over the weeks, they formed a rhythm. He would enter the bakery around the same time each morning, cane tapping softly against the tiled floor. Clara would meet him with a smile and a simple, "Good morning, Oliver." The usual. She always said his name with such sincerity, as though it belonged to someone truly worth knowing. "The usual," he would reply with a faint grin, though in truth it was not the coffee or the bread that brought him back. It was her. Always her. Sometimes they talked for minutes, sometimes for hours. Clara told him about her sister, Emily, who was just finishing high school and wanted to attend college someday. Clara's eyes would light up with pride as she spoke of her, though Oliver caught the subtle shadows of worry that lingered beneath the joy, the financial strain, the sacrifices, the quiet doubts about whether she could keep supporting her sister's dream. "You'd make a wonderful teacher," Oliver told her once, after she helped a little boy count change for his pastries. Clara laughed softly. "Maybe in another life. Right now, my job is making sure Emily gets her chance. That's enough for me." Her selflessness struck Oliver deeply. He had met countless women who longed for status, fame, or fortune, but Clara longed only to give, not to take. Every act of hers, whether staying late to clean, sharing a free roll with a hungry child, or listening patiently to the ramblings of an elderly customer, spoke of a heart that cared more for others than for herself. And Oliver, a man who had built walls of suspicion around his heart, found those walls slowly crumbling each time he was with her. But with every passing day, the secret gnawed at him. In her eyes, he was a poor, blind man. That was the man she cared for, the man she trusted. What would she think when she discovered he could see her perfectly? That he could afford to buy the bakery, the entire street, and everything on it without a second thought? Would she believe anything between them was real, or would she feel used, deceived? The weight of his deception pressed on him during sleepless nights. He would lie awake, staring into the dark, and think of her face. The freckles across her cheeks, the way her hair slipped loose from its bun, the spark in her eyes when she laughed. He saw her more clearly than anyone else in his life, and yet she thought he saw nothing. One rainy afternoon, Oliver entered the bakery soaked from head to toe. His old coat clung to him, dripping water onto the floor, and his hair was plastered to his forehead. Clara gasped when she saw him. "Oliver, you should have stayed home in this storm," she exclaimed, rushing to fetch a towel. She guided him gently to a seat, brushing raindrops from his shoulders. "What were you thinking?" He smiled faintly. "I wanted to hear your voice today." Her hands paused, the towel resting lightly against his shoulder. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, softly, she said, "You really don't know how much that means." It was in that moment Oliver realized he was falling in love with her. Truly, deeply, dangerously in love. It wasn't the infatuation of beauty or charm, nor the shallow thrill of conquest. It was the kind of love that made his chest ache with both joy and fear. But fear it was, because he knew that if he revealed himself too soon, everything could shatter. Clara's kindness might vanish, replaced with anger at his deception. Yet if he waited too long, he risked building a bond on lies too heavy to untangle. One evening, after leaving the bakery, he wandered through the quiet streets, lost in thought. He passed a window where a young couple sat holding hands over dinner, their eyes locked with unspoken devotion. He envied them. They had no masks, no secrets, nothing but the truth between them. He wanted that with Clara, but he had chosen a path that twisted truth into a dangerous game. Still, the thought of giving up his disguise filled him with dread. Because what if Clara was like all the rest? What if, upon seeing his mansion, his wealth, and his status, her love shifted into something else entirely? He could not risk another heartbreak built on greed. So he resolved, at least for now, to continue the charade. He would live as Oliver the blind, poor man, until his heart found enough courage to face whatever truth awaited him. Yet fate had its own plans. For as the days passed, Clara began to confide in him more deeply. She spoke not just of her sister and her work, but of her own heart. "You know," she said one evening as they walked together after her shift, her arm guiding his, "most people see me as just the girl behind the counter. They don't really listen when I talk. But you do. You make me feel seen." Oliver stopped in his tracks. The irony cut into him like a blade. She felt seen by a man who pretended to be blind. He wanted to scream the truth, to tell her that he saw her more clearly than anyone else in the world. But instead, he swallowed the words, forcing a smile. "Clara," he whispered, "you deserve to be seen. You're unforgettable." Her cheeks flushed, though she quickly looked away. For a brief second, Oliver dared to believe she might feel something for him too. But the storm inside his heart only grew stronger. How long could he keep up this masquerade before the truth demanded to be revealed? And when it did, would love survive, or would it shatter into pieces beyond repair? This was no longer just a test. It was his life. And Clara was no longer just a stranger in a bakery. She was becoming the one person who made him believe in love again. Days stretched into weeks, and Oliver, still in his disguise, began to notice something remarkable about Clara. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. She wasn't dazzled by the shine of money or the glitter of status because she believed he had none of it. She wasn't cautious in her words, as so many people were around him when they knew who he truly was. Instead, she spoke openly, laughed freely, and treated him with the kind of dignity that stripped away the walls he had built around himself over the years. Clara had a way of seeing the world that fascinated him. Though she had little, she lived with gratitude for the smallest things. A warm cup of tea on a cold day, the laughter of children playing in the park, the way sunlight painted golden streaks across old buildings at dusk. She noticed beauty in places Oliver had long overlooked. To her, wealth wasn't measured in possessions or bank accounts. It was measured in kindness, loyalty, and honesty. And Oliver, a man who had lived among the richest luxuries life could offer, found himself humbled by her vision. One evening, after spending the day helping her carry groceries and fix a leaky faucet in her modest apartment, Oliver sat with Clara by the window. The city buzzed faintly below, and a quiet peace settled between them. Clara turned to him and said softly, "You know, the world can be cruel, but it can also be gentle if you choose to see it that way." Her words struck him deeply. She thought he was blind, yet she was the one showing him how to truly see. But while Oliver was captivated by her heart, a shadow of doubt began to grow inside him. He had lied. He had woven a story of blindness and poverty to test her loyalty, and as their bond deepened, so did his guilt. Clara trusted him completely, and the thought of betraying that trust gnawed at him day and night. His best friend and confidant, James, who had helped orchestrate his disguise, urged him to come clean. "Oliver, you've found what you were looking for. She's real. She's kind. She cares for you without knowing your wealth. But every day you wait, the truth becomes heavier. If you love her, you can't build that love on deception." But Oliver hesitated. He feared losing her, feared that once she discovered who he truly was, and more importantly, what he had pretended to be, she would walk away. He imagined the disappointment in her eyes, the betrayal in her voice. He couldn't bear it. Yet destiny has a way of pushing truths to the surface. One afternoon, Clara invited Oliver to attend a small gathering at her church. It was a simple event, filled with music, laughter, and the warmth of a community that supported each other through thick and thin. Oliver felt out of place at first, but Clara introduced him with pride. "This is my friend," she said to everyone. "He may not see the world with his eyes, but he sees with his heart, and that's rarer than anything else." Her words pierced through him like arrows. He wanted to tell her right then, to fall at her feet and confess everything. But just as he gathered the courage, a voice from behind interrupted the moment. "Mr. Oliver?" The room fell silent. A businessman, one of his company's clients who recognized him despite his disguise, stood frozen in shock. Oliver's heart sank. He quickly tried to brush it off, fumbling with an excuse, but Clara's eyes widened. She looked from Oliver to the stranger, confusion clouding her gentle gaze. Later that night, Clara asked him directly, "Who are you really? Tell me the truth." Her voice was calm, but there was a firmness that made Oliver's chest tighten. He took a deep breath, the walls of his carefully constructed lie beginning to crumble. "Clara, I haven't been honest with you. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not poor and I'm not blind. My name is Oliver, yes, but I'm a businessman, a wealthy one." He paused, the weight of shame in his tone. "I disguised myself because I wanted to know if someone could love me for me, not for what I have." Clara's face was unreadable. She listened in silence, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if she were holding herself together. Finally, she asked, "So all this time, every word, every moment we shared, was it just a test to you?" "No." Oliver's voice cracked with desperation. "It wasn't a test. First, yes, I wanted to protect myself. But then I met you, and everything changed. You've shown me what love and kindness really mean. You've given me something I never found in all my wealth. Please believe me. What I feel for you is real." Clara turned away, tears glistening in her eyes. She stood up and walked toward the window, staring out at the city lights. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You lied, Oliver. You lied about something so important. Do you know what it feels like to trust someone completely, only to find out it wasn't real?" Oliver's heart broke as he stepped closer. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I swear to you, Clara, the man you've come to know, that man is me. The laughter, the conversations, the way I care about you. That wasn't a lie. That was the truest part of who I am." Silence hung between them. Clara didn't answer right away. Her heart battled between the sting of betrayal and the undeniable connection she felt with him. Finally, she whispered, "I need time." Oliver nodded, his chest heavy. knowing he might lose the one woman who had ever loved him without knowing the power of his name. That night, he left her apartment, the city feeling colder than ever before. For the first time in his life, Oliver, the man who had everything, felt truly powerless. What he didn't know was that Clara, though hurt, couldn't stop thinking about him either. Her heart ached not just from betrayal, but from the realization that despite everything, she still cared for him. It was the beginning of a storm that would either tear them apart forever or bring them together in a way neither of them could have imagined. The days after Oliver's confession stretched endlessly. Clara kept her distance, burying herself in work and leaning on her small circle of friends at the hospital and church. Outwardly, she smiled and carried on, but inwardly her heart was a battlefield. She replayed every moment with Oliver in her mind. The laughter they shared, the quiet conversations, the little acts of kindness he had shown her. None of that felt fake. And yet, the lie hung over it all like a shadow she couldn't ignore. Oliver, on the other hand, was restless. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about business deals, board meetings, or stock values. All he could think about was Clara. The way her eyes softened when she laughed, the way she spoke about life with gratitude, the way she treated him as though he mattered even when she thought he had nothing. He realized that losing her would mean losing the very thing he had been searching for all along, a love unshaken by appearances. James, ever the voice of reason, visited Oliver one evening at his luxurious penthouse. "You can't force her to forgive you," James said gently, pouring them both a drink. "You have to give her space. But Oliver, if she comes back to you, it has to be on the foundation of truth. No more masks, no more tests." Oliver nodded, his chest heavy. "I know. I'd give up everything, every cent I own, just to earn her trust again." Meanwhile, Clara's world was shaken when her landlord informed her that the old building she lived in was being sold. The tenants would have to leave within 2 months. It was devastating news. Clara had little money saved and no family to fall back on. For years, she had dreamed of buying a small house, a place of her own where she could finally feel secure. But with her modest salary as a nurse, that dream always seemed just out of reach. One rainy evening, after another exhausting shift, Clara walked home through the quiet streets, her umbrella barely shielding her from the downpour. As she approached her apartment building, she noticed a car parked outside, sleek, black, unmistakably expensive. And leaning against it, drenched despite the rain, was Oliver. Her heart skipped. Part of her wanted to walk past him, to protect herself from more pain. But another part of her, the part that still longed for his presence, couldn't resist stopping. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady though her hands trembled. Oliver stepped forward, rain dripping from his hair. "I had to see you. I know you asked for time and I've tried to respect that. But I can't stand the thought of you facing everything alone." Clara frowned. "Facing what alone?" He hesitated. "I heard about your building. I know you're being forced out." Her eyes widened in shock. "How do you know that?" "I still have connections, Clara. People talk. But I swear, I'm not here to interfere with your life. I'm here because I care. Let me help you." Her defenses rose immediately. "Help me? By throwing money at me? By buying me a house so you can feel like a hero? I don't need your wealth, Oliver. That's the problem. You don't understand what it's like to live without it." The pain in her words cut deep, but Oliver didn't back down. "You're right. I don't fully understand. But I want to. I don't want to use my money to buy your forgiveness. I want to prove to you that I'm willing to stand beside you, whether we're in a palace or on the street." Clara searched his face, her heart torn between anger and the flicker of sincerity she saw in his eyes. The rain poured harder, soaking them both, but neither moved. Finally, Oliver said softly, "Come with me, just for a walk. Nothing more. Let me show you something." Against her better judgment, Clara agreed. They walked through the city in silence until Oliver led her to a quiet neighborhood she had never visited before. At the end of a narrow street stood a small, charming house with ivy climbing its walls and a light glowing warmly in the window. Clara stopped, confused. "Why are we here?" Oliver took a deep breath. This house, it's yours if you want it. Not as a gift, not as charity, but as a chance. I bought it years ago, thinking someday I might settle down, but I never did. I want you to have it. Not because I pity you, but because I believe you deserve the home you've always dreamed of. Clara's heart raced. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to tell him she didn't need him swooping in to save her. But another part, the part that had spent nights worrying about where she would go, felt her defenses crumbling. Tears filled her eyes. Oliver, you don't get it. It's not about the house. It's about trust. You lied to me. You pretended to be someone you weren't. How do I know this isn't just another act? Oliver's voice shook with emotion. Because this is me, Clara. No disguises, no lies. Just a man who's terrified of losing the woman who changed his life. I don't expect you to forgive me tonight. I just need you to know. I love you. Not because you treated me kindly when I was pretending to be poor. Not because you didn't care about my wealth, but because you saw me when no one else did. Clara stood frozen, tears mingling with the rain. Her heart warred with her mind. She could walk away, protect herself from more pain. Or she could take a step toward him and risk everything for love. In that moment, she didn't answer. She simply turned, walking back into the storm, leaving Oliver standing alone in front of the little house with hope flickering like the faint glow of its windows. But deep inside her, something had shifted. The walls around her heart weren't impenetrable anymore. And Oliver, though left in the rain, felt the faintest glimmer of faith that perhaps their story wasn't over yet. The following weeks were a test of endurance for both Clara and Oliver. Clara tried to bury herself in her work at the hospital, taking on extra shifts to distract her mind from the storm of emotions inside her. Every time she passed the ivy-covered house Oliver had shown her, she felt a tug at her heart, a whisper of longing mixed with fear. Her friends noticed the change in her. "Clara, you're exhausted," her colleague Sarah said one night as they changed out of their scrubs. "You can't keep running away from your feelings forever." Clara forced a smile. "I'm not running. I'm just trying to figure out what's real." But deep down, she knew Sarah was right. She wasn't afraid of Oliver's wealth anymore. She was afraid of her own heart, afraid of trusting someone who had already deceived her once. Meanwhile, Oliver refused to give up. He didn't bombard Clara with grand gestures. Instead, he found small, quiet ways to remind her that he cared. Once, after a particularly grueling shift, she found a thermos of hot tea waiting on the hospital steps, a simple note attached. "For when you're too tired to take care of yourself." Another evening, when she returned to her temporary apartment, she discovered a bag of groceries by the door, filled with all her favorite items. There was no signature, but she knew who it was from. At first, she was angry, frustrated that he wouldn't let her distance herself completely. But slowly, the anger gave way to something softer. These weren't the actions of a man trying to buy forgiveness. They were the actions of a man desperately trying to earn it. One late afternoon, Clara was called into the emergency room to handle a critical case. A car accident victim had been rushed in, and as she hurried to prepare, she froze when she saw the patient being wheeled in. It was Oliver. Her heart dropped. His face was bruised, his arm twisted unnaturally, and blood stained his shirt. Panic surged through her as she rushed to his side. "Oliver!" she cried, gripping his hand. His eyelids fluttered, and he managed a faint smile. "Clara, I didn't mean to scare you." "Don't talk," she ordered, her voice breaking. "Save your strength." The hours that followed were some of the most agonizing of her life. She hovered over him, assisting the doctors as they stabilized him. Every moment was a reminder of how fragile life was, how close she had come to losing him forever. And in those moments, all her doubts, all her fears, melted away. When Oliver finally regained consciousness in his hospital bed, Clara was sitting beside him, her hand clutching his tightly. Tears glistened in her eyes. "You're reckless," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought I lost you." Oliver's lips curved into a weak smile. "It'll take more than a car accident to keep me from you." Her heart broke and healed all at once. She leaned closer, her voice raw with emotion. "Oliver, I can't keep pushing you away. I've been so afraid of being hurt again. But today showed me that life is too short to let fear decide for me." His eyes softened, filling with hope. "Does that mean?" Clara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It means I forgive you, and if you'll still have me, I want to really try with you." Oliver reached up, brushing away her tears with the back of his hand. "Clara, there's never been anyone else. I've been waiting for this moment, praying for it. I don't need your forgiveness as much as I need your love. And if you're willing, I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you can trust me." For the first time in weeks, Clara felt peace wash over her. She rested her head gently on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the sound of a second chance being born. In that small hospital room, with the hum of machines around them and the faint glow of the evening sun slipping through the blinds, Clara and Oliver made a silent promise. Not a promise of perfection, but of honesty. Not a promise of wealth or gifts, but of love that would endure whatever storms came their way. Their story, once tangled in lies and fear, was beginning to rewrite itself into something beautiful, fragile, and deeply real. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew this was the beginning of something that could change their lives forever. The weeks after Oliver's accident became a turning point in their story. Clara remained faithfully by his side as he healed, and with every day that passed, the walls between them crumbled a little more. She saw Oliver not as the wealthy businessman who had hidden behind lies, but as a man scarred by his own fears, desperate to be loved for who he truly was. And Oliver saw Clara not just as the woman who had forgiven him, but as the anchor he never knew he needed, the light that cut through his deepest shadows. When he was finally discharged from the hospital, Oliver invited Clara to spend some time with him at his countryside estate. At first, she hesitated, still unsure about stepping too deeply into the world of his wealth. But when she arrived, she discovered that his home was not filled with cold marble halls and glittering chandeliers like she had imagined. Instead, it was warm, filled with laughter from the staff who clearly adored him, with rooms that carried stories of kindness and generosity. One evening, as the sun painted the Texas sky in hues of gold and crimson, Oliver led her to the old ivy-covered cottage he had shown her months before. This time, however, it wasn't just a dream. The little house had been lovingly restored, with curtains fluttering in the windows, a small garden blooming in the front yard, and a porch swing gently swaying in the breeze. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Oliver, what did you do?" He looked at her with quiet pride. "You told me once your dream was to own a simple, humble home where you could feel safe and free. So I made that dream real. This house, it's yours. Ours, if you'll let me share it with you." Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped inside. The walls smelled of fresh paint, and yet there was a sense of warmth, as though love already lived within them. In the kitchen, she found shelves lined with the cookbooks she adored. In the bedroom, there was a small writing desk, exactly like the one she used to sit at during her breaks at the hospital. Every detail whispered of how deeply Oliver had listened to her, how carefully he had carried her dreams in his heart. Clara turned to him, her voice shaking. "You didn't have to do this. I never wanted your money. I only wanted—" Oliver gently took her hand. "I know. That's why I had to. Because this isn't about wealth. It's about building a life where love comes first. You gave me your forgiveness, Clara. Let me give you a future." For the first time, she allowed herself to fully believe him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him tightly as if to prove she wasn't going to let go. "Then let's build it together," she whispered. From that moment, their lives began to intertwine in the most unexpected ways. Oliver returned to his business with Clara at his side, not as an ornament of his wealth but as his partner, his equal, his strength. The staff and executives who once only knew him as a powerful figure soon came to see the softer side of him, the man who laughed more freely and lived more humbly because of her. But Clara never let go of her own dreams. With Oliver's encouragement, she continued working at the hospital, caring for patients who needed her compassion the most. She used her new resources not for luxury, but to create small funds to help struggling families pay their medical bills. a quiet mission she never spoke of but Oliver supported wholeheartedly. One spring morning, as they sat together on the porch of their little ivy-covered home, Clara leaned against Oliver's shoulder and watched the garden bloom. "You know," she said softly, "when I first met you, I thought you were blind, and in a way maybe you were. Blind to how much love was possible in your life. And I was blind too, to how much I deserved to be loved." Oliver smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Then it seems we both can see clearly now." She laughed gently, her heart full. Yes, clearly. And in that laughter, in the simplicity of a shared moment, they discovered the kind of happiness no deception, no wealth, no fear could ever steal away. Oliver had searched for a woman who would love him for himself, not for his fortune. Clara had feared a love too fragile to survive the truth. But together, they found something greater, an imperfect, enduring, deeply human love that was strong enough to carry them through whatever life would bring. Their story was not about the masks they once wore, nor about the wealth that could have divided them. It was about the choice to stay, to forgive, to see each other's souls and call them worthy. And so, as the sun set behind their ivy-covered house, Oliver and Clara stepped into their new life hand in hand, not with promises of fairy tales, but with the certainty that love, when chosen daily and honestly, could be the most extraordinary gift of all.